Webinar, we will direct you to a screen to ask for your feedback. Your feedback is important to us as we continue to offer high-quality webinars. So you'll see a screen at the end of our presentation with 4 polls, and it just takes a minute to fill out, and so we'd appreciate if you could take the time to do that. So as many of you have already been doing, you've been typing your questions and comments and getting to know one another in the chat pod. And we do encourage this during the webinar. So if you can think of a question or comment at any time, feel free to type that in. And I know that Brenda will do her best to respond. We may have a high volume of questions, and we will do our best to respond to them. If we don't get to them all, I'm sure Brenda will be happy to be in touch with you afterwards.
Yes.
If you do experience any technical difficulty, you can feel free to message me directly. To do that, if you look at the chat pod, the top right-hand corner has a little drop-down menu. Click that menu, a drop-down menu appears, and you can start chat with, scroll over to host, and send me a private message, and I can work with you to resolve any issue that you're having. Brenda has made her PowerPoint available to you, and you can download that at any time. You'll see that right under our videos. There's a Files pod. Simply click the document title, Brenda Watts Stewardship Handout, and then click Download the file, and you'll be able to save that to your computer. I think that's about it for my introduction. I do have a note there about our webinar next week with Tim Keel, and we hope that you'll be able to join us at that time as well. That's Eastern Time, 2 o'clock on Thursday, February 28th. But Brenda, we're very excited to hear from you tonight on the topic of stewardship that is of importance to all of us in congregational ministry. And Brenda has experience in pastoral ministry and is also a stewardship consultant, and I know you'll say more about yourself.
Yep.
So I'm going to sign off. I'll still be here in the background, but I will close my webcam, and Brenda, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Josephine. Well, hello, everybody. This is really exciting for me, my first webinar. I've done lots of stewardship workshops, but not via the internet, so this will be a very special time. So thank you all for signing up for this. It's an honor for me to have you present, and I am very grateful that you are interested in stewardship, and I hope that I can offer you something meaningful in the time that we'll have together. And so what I would like to do in an hour is not a very long time, but what I want to do is cover some things that are really important for us to understand about our stewardship culture, especially in our congregations, and also as it relates to new people that are coming in to check out who we are and why we are. I would also like to offer you some really helpful tips on things that work and some playful ideas. If it's not if it's not fun doing, then often it's not worth doing. And then also we'll reflect a little bit on the need for us to be able to tell our own compelling story. That to me is at the heart of what stewardship is about. And to be honest, in my experience with stewardship, which is over 25 years now, that is something that we're not very good at. So I hope that you will find that helpful. I like to be informal, but the challenge always with a workshop like this is in 1 hour, it'll be like dipping a toe in the water, and that's all we're going to do is get a little bit wet, but I hope that there will be some substance for you. I will try to answer your questions as we come along as best I can. The challenge with questions, though, is that it often takes us in a different direction than what I'm able to cover tonight. But I have given you my contact information at the end of the PowerPoint slides. You will also have it in your handouts, and so you can give me a call or you can send me an email, and I'll do the best I can to respond to your specific questions. Just to kind of give you an overview, what right do I have to talk to you about stewardship? Well, first off, I am a minister working in the United Church of Canada, serving in Crossfield, Alberta, which is 48 kilometers north of Calgary, and I've shown on the map here. where Crossfield is. I actually live in Calgary, but my congregation is just north. I was one of the first graduates of the Diploma in Stewardship Studies that was offered jointly by St. Stephen's College and Queen's Theological College, and that led me to do Masters of Theological Studies with St. Stephen's, specializing in stewardship and congregational transformation and growth and development. I did my thesis on stewardship with a twist, changes in perception, experience, and response. It was a truly special experience. And I also had Garth Mundell. Some of you may know Garth. He was my thesis advisor. And I also had Chris Levan as one of my readers on my thesis, because I really wanted to test it out with people that really did understand and had worked in the whole stewardship area. I have also worked as a consultant and workshop leader, both doing stewardship, welcoming and hospitality, which is also my second passion, and a little bit of work with emerging church. And so I bring that experience to the whole area of stewardship. I have also been on the planning team and workshop leader with the Kananaskis Stewardship event, which we started in 1992. I did workshops every year at those events, which we did every other year, and was also on the Stewardship Development Advisory Committee with General Counsel. But the most exciting thing that I have done is worked with individual congregations, presbyteries, and conferences in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan. I've been out to Nova Scotia one time, and more recently have been involved with the more franchises than Tim Hortons. The other thing I did when I developed my thesis was one of my assignments was to develop a year-long stewardship program, and I didn't want to do that, and asked if I could put together a proposal on how you would go about developing a staffing model for doing stewardship, which I have actually done. So I have embedded myself in congregations as a staff person. It may only be 8 hours a week or 10 hours a week, but I have actually worked as a staff person doing stewardship, and that has made a huge difference. When I talk about the term emerging church, I am going to use the emerging church understanding based on Diana Butler Bass's work, for any of you that's read her book, Christianity for the Rest of Us and the Practicing Congregation. I didn't realize actually when I started using the term emerging church that it was so diverse and very much related to what was happening in the evangelical churches. I theologically am on the liberal end of the theological scale, and so those definitions wouldn't really work for me. And so progressive Christianity may be another way of understanding what I mean when I say emerging church. But it's congregations who are choosing to be intentional about their stewardship relationships with their congregation, and who are not who are not about being same old, same old. So that's the context that I'm working in. I have, first time I ever met Diana Butler Bass actually was at a stewardship event, Next Generation Stewardship in Florida. And it's really interesting when she talks about her 10 signposts for renewal. One of them is one of the most important ones, which I believe is hospitality. And when I do welcoming workshops, I will often say to people, what does that have to do with stewardship? And my response is everything. And so it's really important for us to really take seriously those 10 signposts for renewal, especially when we talk about stewardship. I'd like to jump down to testimony, talking the walk. Stewardship at the heart of it needs to be spoken about with authenticity and integrity. And that for me is absolutely essential. It also needs to be part of the worship experience. I also would like to think that we could use stewardship to reflect beauty, which may not be some of the first things that we would think about if we were talking about stewardship specifically. But stewardship for me, that's why I wrote my thesis, Stewardship with a Twist, because I tend not to approach it in the typical ways. Also, I'd like you to know, too, it's really important. When I started doing stewardship, I knew absolutely nothing about it. And as far as I was concerned, it was the United Church's version of a dirty word. I gave $5 a week with nothing to the Mission and Service Fund, and it was one of those words that when you used it, I tuned out. And so My approach to stewardship is to take very seriously that beginning place, because I have made a promise that I wouldn't inflict on others what was inflicted on me about stewardship. So I've worked really hard at trying to change the experience of stewardship. I'd like to start off by offering you a definition of stewardship that has been really helpful for me. My background is also in human resources. I've been a recruiter. I've worked in organization development and training and development. And in my very formative years, in my early 20s, I started working for Syncrude out of Edmonton, and then I also spent 2 years in Fort McMurray. And I'm going to say, just in case people get their backs up because of all of the negative press around the tar sands, working for Syncrude was the most incredible work experience of my life. It was like being in a holy environment, and I have never experienced a work experience like that since then, including in the church. So it was a truly special time, and I learned a lot about relationships, team development, transformation, how to turn people on, and how to take very seriously how we relate to each other. And it was at that time, interestingly enough, and not in the church at all, that I got the Syncrude definition of stewardship, which was the wise use of our resources, which at that time they defined as capital, equipment, human resources, and the environment, in order to maximize our return on our investment. And for me, that has been a really, really good definition of stewardship. And one of the questions that I would like to ask all of us is, does that definition apply to us in the church? Do we see our ministries and our relationships in our communities as a good investment and worth our time, our energy, our resources? And so I offer you that definition and hope that you will find it helpful. When I started learning about stewardship, when I asked, what is stewardship? I got the response, stewardship is everything I do after I say I believe. And I didn't find that very helpful at all in helping me understand it. It didn't tell me anything. The other thing that I've realized is it raises the question, what is it that we believe about the nature of God? Because I see stewardship and the nature of God as directly connected together. And if we don't really understand what we believe about God, then what does that definition tell us or give us in a stewardship context? Ironically, the more stewardship work I've done, in some ways it's a true definition, but it's not helpful, especially for people who are getting started. And so I'd like to say just a little bit more about that. Interestingly enough, in my work with stewardship, one of the things that I've discovered is, do people in the church really believe that God is abundant? And that we are willing to put our faith and trust in that abundant nature of God. And I believe that stewardship is an opportunity for us to go beyond the boundaries and move into limitless thinking. And I want to give you a true example of what I mean by this. I was hired by a congregation who was engaging in a major capital redevelopment of their church, and they wanted to raise $1.9 million. I had worked with them a little bit, met them, had been asked to come and do a presentation to the board about stewardship, and then they had asked me to submit a proposal about doing a capital campaign, which I had never done before. I was interviewed for the position, was in competition actually with some professional fundraisers, and they decided to hire me. What was interesting is in the interview, I turned around and said to them that I would use stewardship principles in the development of this program, and the response was, this isn't a stewardship program, this capital program. And my response back to them was, oh, really? But what was interesting at that time is that the treasurer, and any of you that are treasurers and any of you that have been in congregations will relate to this story, stood up on the Sunday that I was meeting the congregation for the first time in my official capacity as the facilitator for the capital campaign, said that if the givings continued the way they were, by the end of the year there would be a deficit. Sound familiar? And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more in a bit. And I thought, well, this is just a great way to start off a capital campaign. And yet, we raised $2.2 million in that congregation. But I did a moratorium on limited thinking. We adopted leadership qualities that said that if we didn't believe that the congregation had the capacity to raise the money, if we didn't believe in the merits of the expansion of the building and what the impact it had on ministry, and if we didn't put a moratorium on our negative language, then we better just pack our bags and go home. And that was a very critical point in that particular campaign, is that everyone signed a covenant agreement with leadership principles that we did believe in a God that was abundant and that was generous. We were willing to put our faith and trust in that abundance, and that we would not use language that said we can't, we don't, we shouldn't, we wouldn't, and so on. And so that to me is a very important basis for stewardship, is that stewardship for all of us needs to be about limitless thinking. And if we don't believe that we can find the resources, or that the resources are available to us, then how are we going to lead with integrity, creativity, and imagination? And so I offer you this quote also from Albert Einstein. Now some of these slides here we go. We changed them and they wouldn't upload. Belief for me is a very important piece of this. And so one of the questions that you might want to ask your congregation or ask yourself as a stewardship leader is, what do you believe about the nature of God? Because we have to own our own stewardship understandings if we're going to lead with any kind of integrity. And I also believe that we have the capacity to imagine big. And I think that if we put our faith and trust in our imagination and in God and work together, that remarkable things can happen. And I'm going to say that has been my experience. What does faith have to do with it? I think faith has to do with stewardship hugely. Faith is the spiritualized imagination. Faith is not belief without proof, but trust without reservation. And so again, it may sound repetitive, or it may sound so very basic, and yet my experience has been that if we don't address some of those basic issues about what do we believe about the nature of God, we're not going to be as effective as we need to be when we do our stewardship work. I also think too that it's at the heart of speaking about stewardship with passion, enthusiasm, and with gratitude, with a smile on our face. Stewardship is an opportunity to tell your story, your congregational story. We've tended to see stewardship as raising money to fund our church. And while the money piece of it is an absolutely essential piece, and I never shy away from that, money is not the reason why we do it. We want to tell our story about why we make a difference in our communities, with the people that we have in our congregations, the people that we connect with across the world. And when I'm talking about tell your story, I'm not talking about the Christian story, although that's very much a part of it. But what is your congregational story? What is it that excites you and turns you on? What keeps you coming to church in your congregation and participating and offering your leadership and offering your financial resources? What's interesting, though, is we're not very good at our ability to tell our story. We tend to use budgets as our story, which I think are not particularly wise use of time and paper. When I do a stewardship campaign, I never use a budget because I don't think that it's the most important document. But we'll talk about that a bit more. At the heart of creativity, I love this cartoon. And I can imagine, I hope you're chuckling a little bit there, but how many of our stewardship programs reflect the black and white slide versus the other one that is full of energy, playfulness, color, texture, richness, and so on. And so I think that this is also at the heart of, we have to step out of the typical stewardship box and give ourselves permission to play and have fun. And I'm going to offer you some ideas on how we might be able to do that. I'm wondering, you might have some questions here. Creativity and imagination. If you look at this picture, I love this picture of the cat looking in the mirror and seeing back the tiger, the lion. When we imagine what it is that we would like to be, the picture that we hold in our hearts really, really matters, even though what we are, like the cat or kitten, may be our reality. But I think that stewardship is about changing the perception by changing the experience. And I'm going to tell you another live story. When I first started working at the conference level, doing stewardship work, I wasn't even on the stewardship committee yet, but had been invited to help plan a major 1-hour stewardship presentation on the floor conference. My training background had me asking the question, well, what happens when stewardship comes on the floor of conference? And everybody laughed and said, oh, that's, it's hilarious. Everybody takes an extended coffee break. And I said to them, then what are we going to do to capture and get their attention? And so this slide here is really important. Language, the energy, the spirit, and the enthusiasm that we use when we talk about stewardship is absolutely essential. And yet all of us know and have experienced that often when stewardship is brought up, it's talked about because we are in financial trouble. And so it's language of desperation rather than language of energy and excitement. The imagery that we use, I very much believe in color, texture, and vibrancy, making everything that we can do as 3D as possible. I do that all the time in my ministry and especially in my stewardship. So if you had walked into our congregation when we did the Aboriginal Day of Prayer, you would have seen a 10-foot teepee that we created right in the sanctuary. We've had campfires with real fuel that has the look of fire. Vibrant color and texture is really, really important. And so one of the questions you might ask yourself is, what kind of images do you present to your congregation when you're talking about stewardship? And be as vibrant and colorful as you can be. And step out of that box and be as playful. Gather a bunch of people around you. Going back to that conference experience, what we did is we wrote a rap. Now, raps are no longer the big deal like they used to be, but we started this rap in the 50s. It was rock and roll. Today, the church is rapping as we share together stories of how stewardship can happen. And it caught people's attention, and they literally stopped and turned around and said, what's going on? This is not what we expected with a stewardship presentation. And then throughout that particular hour, we distributed the long skinny balloons that you make animals out of, and everyone had a balloon at their table. There would be 8 at a table, and we encouraged people to blow the balloons up and to create an image of the steward as a group. Well, the conference, with about 650 people in Alberta at the time, erupted into laughter and playfulness. And when we walked and circulated around, people really got into the assignment, had a lot of fun, and the creativity and imagination that came out of the table groups was awesome. And then we invited them to name their image of the steward. Interestingly enough, after that particular experience, the stewardship committee for the conference kept planning special events where we used creativity, imagination, and playfulness. And next thing you know, people were starting to ask if they could be on the stewardship committee. I have a question here from George. Is it important that the minister know what individuals give to the church? George, I'm going to hold off on the answer to that because I'm going to address that in a minute. And my answer is yes. Connecting the dots between what we value and what we give. Unfortunately, we often do, our stewardship motivation is in support of the budget, which is a flat, uninspired document that most people don't know about and actually don't really care about. The people that really care about the budget are the people in leadership positions. And so I would say a budget is not a motivating document at all. But one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, what is it that you value as a congregation? And I would caution you about using sort of motherhood statements, but rather, what is it that makes you distinct, unique, and what are the things you in particular get excited about in your congregation? And when you can make those connections between giving and what it is that you value, then you will start to connect those dots in a significant way, because we have basically talked about stewardship in relation to balancing the operating budget. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that that's not an important part of our work. What I am saying, though, is that is not what motivates people to give, at least not anymore like it used to. Some of the mythology around stewardship, and that's where we'll get to your question, George. Our problem is money. Well, I'm going to say no, the problem is not money, although we've convinced people so much that it is money. The problem we have in the church is giving. And I want to make that distinction using the example of being able to raise $2.2 million for a capital project while the treasurer was defining or explaining to people that the congregation would be in a deficit situation. We have the money. The issue is we haven't been able to help people figure out what motivates them to want to give it to the work that we do. The other one I want to talk about is deficit reduction programs work. And I'm going to tell you another story. I was my first congregation that I ever joined as an adult was a new church development congregation in Edmonton. It was the baby of Edmonton Presbytery. And that's where I got my perception of stewardship. Every year, the treasurer would stand up in front of the congregation and say, if givings continue on the way they are, we will have a $10,000 deficit by the end of the year. And so they started a deficit reduction program. And I wrote a check to the deficit reduction program. And we would raise about $9,000, which left us $1,000 short or $2,000 short. And that's how we started out the year. In October, the treasurer would stand up and tell the congregation, if things continue on the way they are, by the end of the year, we will have a deficit of about $10,000. So they started another deficit reduction program, and I wrote another check. Year 3, we raise about $8,000 towards the deficit, start off the year again slightly short, and in October the treasurer stands up and says blah blah blah. And I learned a very important thing at that particular time. If the deficit reduction program does not change the giving patterns in the congregation, and if you don't change the giving patterns in your congregation, you will end up with the same results. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And yet we do this all the time with our stewardship program. So a deficit reduction mentality language does not work. We need to find other ways of defining, again, our passion about our ministry. The other one, myth, if everyone just gave 5% more. I love this one. Or $5 a week more. The United Church of Canada historically is one of the worst givers in North America. Now there's disputes around that, but we traditionally have been known to give about 2% of our income. And we also know, if we take a look at our giving patterns in our congregations, that 20% of the people give 80% of the money. So 5% of bad giving is still bad giving. And so that whole language is not going to be very helpful. So we need to be intentional about how do we teach people what it is that we need to give. The other myth that we do is we do one program, one stewardship program with one letter, one kind of language for the entire congregation, not taking into account that 20% of the people are giving 80% of the money at the top end of the giving scale, but we talk to them like somehow they have let us down or somehow they are responsible for bailing us out of our financial issues. And this program or concept came from Wayne Barrett out of the United Methodist Church in the States, and I have used his program, the Not Every Member Visitation, which is looking at that we need to define what our cohort groups are in our congregations around giving, and he suggests dividing them into 5. I usually divide it into 4. I find 5 is a little bit too many, but I break down my giving patterns and I talk to my congregation and communicate with them using those 4 different cohort groups. For example, the top group, the 80% that give the most, you don't turn around and ask them to give more. You thank them for their commitment, their loyalty, and their generosity, and then assume and ask that they will continue to lead by example. But gratitude is the primary thing with them. The group at the bottom of the cohort, the people that are on the fringe, that come to church at Christmas and Easter, we have a misperception that they're going to be the ones that are going to help us fund our churches, and they're not. What we use with them is a donor mentality where we invite them to make a donation to the church. It will probably happen once a year. We invite them to come to our special services, but we speak to them very, very differently, talking about why the church matters in the community and hoping that they will support the church. The treasurer is the key. I usually give the treasurer time away, especially when it comes to doing stewardship education. It has been my experience that the treasurer is not the best spokesperson to do stewardship education. Their job is to report to the board about what the state of the finances are. I would not have them be the primary source of communication to the congregation. When I work with a congregation, I usually always say, give me the last word so that I can bail out of the hole that the treasurer tends to dig us into. Treasurers carry a lot of burden around the financial outcomes of our churches. They take their job very, very seriously, but they are not necessarily the best people to be the communicators of what it is that we need. The last question, and this will address what George is asking. We know what people give. We don't have a clue what people give. I'm very, very strongly believe that if you are going to do a comprehensive stewardship program that is targeted to where your giving patterns are in your congregation, you absolutely must know what people give. I was also at a congregational growth and development workshop that was held as part of Epiphany Explorations in January, and Cameron Trimble, who is an absolute delight around congregational renewal, she talks about the same thing, that we must know what people give. We have kept giving a secret, and what happens is it tends to be get reduced to power and control. I believe that the ministers should know what people give. And let me respond to the question that the minister is going to behave differently towards the people. And my response to that is give your minister some credit here. Knowing how much people give is a really important issue, especially around leadership, because if you're not leading by example, then you shouldn't be in a leadership position. The people who do the envelopes know exactly what people give, and I've heard a lot of stories about how disheartened people may be when they hear or witness when they're opening envelopes, people who are in leadership positions who are at the low end of the giving scale. So I think it's really important. It's important to do a targeted program that looks at breaking down what your giving patterns are in your congregation and then speaking in an intelligent way to those people in a way that's going to motivate them. But I also need you to know that it's very important that that information be kept extremely confidential. So who are the people that need to know? I think the minister should, and I think that the consultant, if you have one, like I make it mandatory in the work that I do, and I work with the stewardship chair. After that, nobody else needs to know. Also, we're not going to misuse the information in any way. It just helps us give a breakdown of what it is that we want to be able to focus on when we do a campaign. And I'm just reading here, in the one case does not fit all. What are the other cohorts other than 80%? Well, there's the top 20% gives 80% of the money. That's what I call your leadership group. Then you have the next group down, which is the people that you want to challenge to move up into that leadership group. Then you have the people who are on the fringe, and you need to be really clear that they are that once a year, twice a year giver, and you don't want to ever ignore them, because collectively they could make a significant contribution, but they're not going to be the ones to balance your budget. And then the other specific group that I think is really important is, who are your new people? And how do you talk to them about giving when they're new to the church and may never have given to a church before? So there's a different group. Things that work. Change the perception and the experience of stewardship. And one of the first ones that we assume is that we need to cut back. And we've used that expression about the rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. If you don't have high expectations of your congregation, and you don't dream and you don't believe that your dreams can come true, then basically what you're doing, I think, is cutting off the legs of your ministry. Luther Snow, some of you may have heard of him. He's got a book called The Power of Asset Mapping, and he walks you through how to work with your congregation or community, and either way, to build on your strengths and what your assets are. So often we see the glass as half empty instead of more than half full. So what are the things that are exciting about who you are? What is it, the things that you can build on? I think that we're a very competitive church, and we don't understand what does it mean to be a small church very well. My congregation has about 30, an average attendance on 30, but it can be as low as 15 on any given Sunday, like the long weekend. Actually, we had 23 this Sunday, but I am certainly not 100 or 150 or 200 or more size congregation, but I work really, really hard at making sure that my congregation has a strong sense of self-esteem about who they are. Bigger is not necessarily better. And so understanding what your assets are is really important. The other thing is that testimonies do work. And we're not very good at testimonies in the United Church of Canada. But one of the things that I do a lot is I talk about my own journey with giving. And even at our annual meeting in my own congregation, I told them how much I give and how close, where that is in the tithe journey of getting there. Because I believe it's really important that I lead by example. When you're talking to people about how much to give, you need to talk about not this is what you should do, but this is what I do and why I do it. And that to me is very important. We should always be using I language. I'm going to digress just a little bit and offer you, how do you talk to people about how much giving is needed? I believe very strongly in setting what I call your standard for giving, and it's very simple. You take what your budget is, for example, what your requirements are to balance your local budget, what you expect to come in from offerings, divided by your number of financially supporting households, and that will give you what your average needs to be. For example, if you have a $100,000 budget coming in for local and you have 100 financially supporting households, then your average would be $1,000 a year. from every one of your givers. My experience has been, though, that most congregations need somewhere between $1,300 and $1,500 as an annual average in order to balance their operating budget. So I would suggest that you look at the difference between what you're raising and what you need, and that will tell you where the work needs to be done. I hope that's making sense. I'm covering, there's a lot of stuff here. Things that work. Promote gratitude as a spiritual exercise in your congregation. How do you say thank you? I'm going to tell you another live story. When I did my first consulting work with a congregation in Calgary, we had developed a strategy, and then we invited someone to come in and who was the wise person in the congregation. And we were going to run our strategy past him to get sort of his perspective, his input, and his good housekeeping seal of approval. In the process, while we were together, he started to cry. And I was the only woman in the room. The rest were all men. It was the chair of the stewardship committee, the treasurer, the finance chair, on and on it went. This man had been extremely valuable to the congregation. He was highly respected, and he broke down in tears. And what was revealed at that time is that he had served his presbytery during a very, very difficult time, and with his leadership skills and finesse was able to work his way through a major conflict within the presbytery. And not once did his congregation ever say thank you or acknowledge the contribution that he had made. And he had served loyally, faithfully for a long time, and yet here he was feeling broken at the core of his spiritual soul because he did not feel recognized or understood or even a sense of appreciation of the sacrifices that he had made on behalf of his congregation. And that was a defining moment for that particular team of stewardship people, and they started a flurry of thank you cards to their key people. So I believe that thank you is one of the most important things that we can do. How do you help your people find out what is priceless about your ministry and your congregation? I love that commercial that shows all of those warm, endearing relationships that are being developed, and then the commercial says, "This is priceless," and for everything else there is MasterCard. We have really got to help our congregations discover what it is that's priceless about who they are and what they do. And that connects back into when they see the value in that. When you tell them as leaders how proud you are of what they have achieved, they will respond. Another thing I'm going to use as an example, when I grew up, my dad used to say, praise makes a person live up to it. And I believe that's really, really an important thing. I tell my congregation all the time, how proud I am of who they are and what they do. I never miss an opportunity for them to do that. And it builds their sense of self, and it also gives them pride in their ministry. This slide that you're seeing, unfortunately, was one of the ones that didn't upload. It rearranged itself, and I apologize for that. I think it's an exciting time to be the church. We have lots of challenges, of course we do, but I also think it's an exciting time. And I really believe in the phase dare to dream and dare to imagine, because I believe they have an amazing way of coming true. And so the question you may want to ask in your stewardship work, and use stewardship as your platform, what are your dreams for your congregation? And how do you tell your congregation what those dreams are? Things that work. Give yourself permission to have fun and be playful. People are attracted to positive energy and successful experiences. I think that's a psychology here. We're attracted to children because they're playful, they're enthusiastic, they play with abandon, and we need to use that as a framework for doing our stewardship work, because I think when we do, we're infectious. Be subversive, infiltrate anything and everything, because our entire ministry really at its core is the stewardship work that we do. And I will also say, don't avoid the hard stuff. Deal with it honestly, sincerely, authentically, and with class. Now, I go back to that last point. That has a lot to do with the language that we use. It's really, really important. And who's doing the talking. For example, at an annual meeting that we had, there are particular people in the congregation who, when they speak, you can feel depressed even after they speak. It doesn't mean that they don't care about the church, but they don't have a way of inspiring people. They tend to see the glass half empty instead of the glass half full. And so you want to be very careful about who the people are that you choose to have speak about your ministry, and especially about money. Because my experience has been, we can take 5 steps forward and 10 steps back, and it takes us a long time to recover from those 10 steps back. And I've experienced even in my stewardship consulting work where people are still talking about programs that failed over 20 years ago, but the memories that congregations have last forever. A picture paints 1,000 words. When we did our annual report this year, we did a PowerPoint presentation to music that had pictures of all of the things that we had done in a year. And so having someone in your congregation that will take pictures and then sell your ministry using pictures, because people relate to people, especially their own people. And so these are some samples of some pictures from my own congregation. And any excuse to have a party is a good one. That's the language that I use in our congregation, but we celebrate and have fun as much as we possibly can, because we know that the hard stuff is always with us. It needs to be balanced out with our own spirit of playfulness. Oh, that's too bad. That slide is in the way. I'm going to share with you something playful, symbols of ministry. It's something that I came up with. I believe in tactile experiences as well. So I spent about 3 hours one Sunday while I was working as a stewardship consultant in a congregation in a dollar store in Calgary, looking for about 25 items that I could use that would connect to ministry. This is a very playful outcome, and so I'm going to show you the items that I came up with, and then I'm going to read some examples of what those items mean and how you use them to define ministry. So in the middle there on the left-hand side, you will see 3 hangers. And so everyone in the congregation gets one item of some kind, no exception. So there's a basket of all of these items collected when they come into the sanctuary. Your greeters are told to please make sure everyone has one item in their hand, including the children. And so then I ask them, when I call out the name, to please stand and wave their item. And so this is the hanger. You are holding hospitality. We choose to be welcoming and caring of the stranger or newcomer that crosses our threshold. In this way, we offer God's love and acceptance to others. Hold hospitality with dignity and respect. You will also notice the small little 5-watt light bulbs. A building, however useful, without light is dark, scary, and ominous. Light brings the things that we fear out of the darkness and into a place of love. Our electricity is not just a utility. It keeps us and others in the light. Hold your light with gratitude. I actually got that idea about light bulbs from my first congregation that I served in Vulcan. At night, it would be pitch black. And if you walked down the street, it was kind of a scary, ominous place. And so that's where that came from. Ice cubes. You'll notice that. A building without warmth is cold, hostile, and unwelcoming. We offer a safe place where all people can be embraced with kindness and service. We are grateful for the furnace and boiler that keeps our building comfortable. Hold your ice cube as a reminder of our mission to be warm. What I've tried to do with this is to offer sort of a double entendre, so that there's a subtlety in it, but it also has a playfulness. the fuzzy elastics at the top, and then I kind of will move on. We are a church of diversity. We have an openness to change and a desire to grow in our faith rather than remain static, inflexible, and resistant. It isn't always easy to be adaptive. We stand out, we take risks, and some people will even call us unchristian or evil, but we choose this path anyway. Hold your crazy elastic with love and hope rather than judgment and fear. Again, the whole point of these symbols is, and there's 25 of them, trying to cover a broad spectrum, is to give people something that they can hang on to, that they relate to, they get into a personal relationship with, but it describes in a playful way what our ministry is about. So I hope that you will have fun playing with that. I also like to use crystals. Hospitality and welcoming is really important, and so I will say to my congregation often that we welcome you to this holy and sacred place by a God who says on the day that you were born, oh my God, you are absolutely awesome. You are your light if you let it shine. And who you are, like that of a crystal, when you let your light shine, you will reflect all of the colors of the rainbow, and you will give light to the world and beauty to the world. You honor us with your presence. You are the spark in God's eye. We are so glad that you have chosen to be with us. Now again, when I do a stewardship program and I use crystals, I give everyone in the congregation a crystal so that they can hang on to it. So again, another example of a tactile experience. Pledge ideas. We often talk about narrative budgeting, and yet what we do is we tend to take an entire budget, let's say just $100,000, and break it down into the key components. This is how much is spent on worship. This is what's spent on outreach, Christian education, and so on. I don't find that kind of narrative budgeting process all that helpful, so I have broken it down even farther with what I call pledge ideas. And so what you would do is take what your standard for giving is, in other words, what your annual amount is that you need as an average for every financially supporting household, and then out of that create some pledges that relate specifically to the work that you do. So I'll give you an example. For worship, for example, $2,000 will provide music resources for the choral and handbell choirs, which enriches and deepens the worship experience, not to mention delighting the congregation. $1,000 will provide seasonal and special items to enhance the sanctuary. These items offer visual focus for reflection and meditation during worship and special services. For Christian education, a pledge of $1,200 will provide educational resources for programs like the Faith Discovery Sunday School program or the God Squad Youth Group, all designed to support education of children and youth in the church and community. So there's an example of taking smaller portions. It's encouraging people to give more. So if you've got people giving $500 and what you really need is for them to give $12, then here are some ideas that they can see how their pledge specifically makes a difference. There's a question here. Can you make available the language used in the descriptions? If you send me an email, I'd be happy to send you a sample of that. But I also encourage you to make up your own. That's in response to the symbols of ministry. We're actually running out of time here, so I'm going to skip the good neighbor exercise. What I was hoping to do is we're not very good about talking about why we should come to church, and this is an exercise that I would encourage you to use. Some of the details are there, but it's having a contest about should I go to church or should I stay home and cut the grass. When we do this in a competition, the grass cutters always win, which means we're not very good at reflecting how we talk about the church. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do this. Talking about our faith is really, really important. And so what I would recommend is that you as a congregation, your leadership, sit down and say, why does this church matter to us? What turns us on about us? What excites us about us? What is it about our faith that keeps us coming to church? Because if we can't communicate that to the people who are coming through our doors, then why would they want to support us financially? So I think that that's really, really important, is why does our faith matter to us? And how would we go about sharing that with others that isn't about, well, you should come to church, rather than we're so excited about what we offer and how it's made, I'm excited about how it's made me a better person, the personal testimony here. There's some stuff here. Be intentional about what you say, develop a script, write it out and use it regularly, include it in your material that you use to promote your congregation, include it in your website, but be passionate and enthusiastic. That box is in the way. I wanted to just share a little bit with a song. God, you give good gifts to me. The words are up here. I guess we're only going to be able to sing one verse. I'm going to play my ukulele, and I hope you can hear it. But this particular song was written by Earl from United Church of Christ. When I found the words to it, he said that you could sing it to take my life and let it be. So if you were to do it to that tune, this is what it would sound like. God, you give good gifts to me. This I live so gratefully. Well, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to sing it to Froggy Goes a Courting. So I invite you to join me and have fun with it. God, you give good gifts to me. Got my chords. You enrich all my days. Now I come to sing your praise. Now I come to give myself on. Give my time and give my wealth. Oh yeah. Give my gifts so generously, as oh God you give to me. Whenever I have done that song as the closing song to a stewardship service, people are bopping around, they're having an absolutely great time. I work with the choir and the musician to get them to really rock that song, and people have a lot of fun with it. But again, it's one of those ways of changing the perception of stewardship by changing the experience of it. I feel like I've talked a lot and really fast, and I'm sorry about that. There's a question here, wondering if you recommend designated giving to lines of the budget. I'm not a big fan of designated giving. I know there's a lot of pressure out there to adopt that kind of attitude because people tend to give to the things that they're passionate about. I think it's important for us to talk about the things that we are excited about and encourage people to give to those things, but I don't think we want to we need people to support our entire ministry, not just a pet project. And so I think we can talk about giving in designated ways, but I would not encourage designated giving. We are the whole people of God. Our entire ministry matters to us. There's nothing that's not important, because if we do, maintenance is not a particularly exciting item, and people might choose to support other aspects of ministry and not support others. So I think that I would not encourage that. I don't find it particularly helpful. Are we able to access your presentation to use it in upcoming meeting with your narrative? I have the handouts are available. As you can see, you can copy them down. I'm not sure what the other part of your question is, if you want to clarify that. Claire Simpson's asking, do you have stewardship services throughout the year? I do stewardship every Sunday. I don't, at the annual meeting, I took advantage of the annual meeting as an opportunity to talk about stewardship to my congregation, because we so often approve the budget and then don't do anything with it. And so I thought, well, now's as good a time as any to talk about why I give and why it matters. When we talk about compelling story, I think it's really important to be able to find what a compelling story is and how can you use that to share with your congregation. So when I talked about what is it that has value, how do you describe it as being priceless? I have done stewardship sermons where I have actually gone and identified the things that have happened with particular people and talked about it in the language of priceless, using that model of the MasterCard and saying, this is priceless. This is priceless. And for everything else, well, there's MasterCard, you know. So I think you can also have a stewardship focus, though. I don't have any problems with that, only I would do it over a week, or I mean over a month, not just one Sunday. I have a wonderful card program that I unfortunately don't have time to share, but that looks at doing an actual program. The folks at High River did it. That's really, really wonderful, sort of leading up to how much you would give. Can I comment on the makeup of a stewardship planning committee? Get your most creative people, playful people. The role of the stewardship committee for me is to implement your stewardship strategies and programs. They should be the thinkers, the planners, the strategists, and whatever. It should not be your finance people, but they have to be people with passion, and they have to really care about stewardship and knowledgeable about it. We're out of time, dear heart, aren't we? There's my contact information for anybody that wants to get a hold of me further. Oh dear, I wish I could talk to you for 10 hours. Oh, I don't have my headset in. There we go. Sorry about that.
Well,
Yeah, no, it's because I took my headset off to play the ukulele. Could you hear it? The ukulele? Oh, good.
Thank you so much, Brenda.
Yeah.
I think I can echo everybody's thoughts. Oh.